The heart-wrenching loss of 4 young lives in Calgary, one of Canada's coldest locales, was an unimaginable tragedy. These 4 vibrant girls were taken from the world far too soon, leaving their families in a prolonged state of despair, having long since relinquished hope for justice. Yet, decades later, the tides turned with the marvels of modern technology. But who were these cherished souls? Ava Dvorak was a spirited young girl, radiating joy and energy that captivated everyone around her. Her infectious laughter and lively demeanor ensured she was the center of attention wherever she went. Friends and family fondly remember her as a whirlwind of activity, always singing and dancing, bringing light to their lives. Eva loved to swim and roller skate with her sisters and cousins, surrounded by a wide circle of friends for someone her age. At just 14 years old, she was an 8th grade student at Ian Bazalgette Junior High School in Calgary, where she formed a close friendship with Patsy McQueen. Eva resided in a quaint street. Her home, a charming bungalow-style duplex nestled at the neighborhood's edge, with a picturesque view of a walking path. Both she and Patsy enjoyed the convenience of living within walking distance of their school. Patsy, born Patricia McQueen on September 2, 1961, was the beloved daughter of Alastair and Sarah McQueen. Patsy was part of a large family with 10 siblings, 6 sisters and 4 brothers. She had a passion for baseball and, like many teenagers, enjoyed music and dancing. Patsy was known for her great sense of humor and loved to play jokes on others. She often spoke about her desire to travel, eagerly awaiting the day she could explore the world. Patsy took pleasure in bringing joy and smiles to those around her. On the afternoon of February 12, 1976, Patsy McQueen and Eva Dvorak skipped class and spent time at their friends' homes. They had plans to party over the weekend, but as the days went by, they failed to check in with their families. No visits, no phone calls. This prompted their parents to become concerned and contact the authorities. A missing persons report was subsequently filed, and a search effort was initiated. During the investigation, students at the school were questioned and revealed that illicit substance use was prevalent, both during and after school hours, involving substances like marijuana and certain chemicals, but not hardcore drugs like injectables. They confirmed that both Patsy and Eva were involved in these activities, with Eva seemingly looking up to Patsy. The police conducted further inquiries and determined that the girls had vanished during the night. The last reported sighting of the girls was around midnight on February 15th, walking near the intersection of 9th Avenue and 12th Street Southeast in Calgary, heading in the direction of downtown. Tragically, the search for the missing girls came to a grim end when they were discovered several days after being reported missing, and it was no longer a matter of recovery. A resident of Calgary made the tragic discovery at 10:30 a.m., finding the bodies of the 2 girls under the High Valley Underpass, located west of Calgary. The individual who found them observed that they were lying together, fully clothed, with no visible signs of assault or trauma. Despite a thorough investigation which included interviewing witnesses, analyzing tire impressions, and conducting toxicology tests, no evidence of illegal substances was found, and the cause of death was determined to be asphyxia. They had simply stopped breathing. The autopsy failed to reveal any significant findings to explain their deaths, and the conclusion was based on deduction. A newspaper article published 6 weeks after the tragedy made some controversial claims about the girls' actions leading up to their deaths. According to the article, they had voluntarily consumed illegal substances and had also smoked marijuana and consumed alcohol. The article went on to describe how they had been asked to leave school on Friday due to alcohol on their breath and had spent the weekend party hopping, attending multiple gatherings, staying with friends, and engaging in substance use. A neighbor reportedly encountered them on 9th Avenue and offered them a ride, which they refused. The article's narrative seemed to shift some of the blame onto the girls themselves, implying that their choices had contributed to their tragic fate. However, it's crucial to remember that, as minors, they lacked the maturity and judgment to make informed decisions. Melissa Rehorek, a 20-year-old who had relocated from Windsor to Calgary, resided at a downtown YMCA while employed as a housekeeper at a nearby hotel. Those who knew her characterized her as a diligent and adventurous individual. She was a young woman with an optimistic disposition, who had a tendency to trust others perhaps too readily, someone who would typically see the good in everyone she met. Given her passion for hiking and travel, she had previously embarked on a trip to Banff, seeking to immerse herself in nature and explore the Canadian wilderness. She confided in a friend that she intended to hitchhike westward for a weekend excursion to the mountains. Melissa departed on the evening of September 15th, 1976. As Melissa's roommate bid her farewell, she had no inkling that this would be their final encounter. It was customary for Melissa to embark on hitchhiking excursions outside the city during her days off. Attired in a blue denim jacket and matching skirt, complemented by a red blouse, she set out around 8:30 p.m. to secure a ride. A Calgary transit driver may have dropped her off near Highway 1 in the Bowness area, a northwest Calgary neighborhood known for its relaxed atmosphere and proximity to natural attractions. Bowness boasts a mix of residential homes, local shops, and community hubs, and is conveniently situated near the Trans-Canada Highway, making it an ideal departure point for westward travel toward the mountains. The area also features scenic spots like Bowness Park, which offers picnic areas, boating opportunities, and ice skating in winter, all nestled beside the picturesque Bow River. The following day at 10:50 a.m., a hiker stumbled upon an unusual sight approximately 22 kilometers west of Calgary. Upon closer inspection, the hiker realized it was a body. The police subsequently identified the deceased as Melissa Rehorek. Her body was found in a ditch adjacent to a secluded gravel road. The presence of evidence indicating a struggle, combined with the autopsy report, revealing asphyxia and a head injury, suggested a violent encounter. Notably, investigators discovered long black hair strands clutched in Melissa's hand, which did not belong to her. Despite conducting hair analysis, the police were unable to identify a suspect. It appears that Melissa may have encountered her attacker while hitchhiking, leading to a brutal assault, potentially by an individual with long black hair, who remained unknown for nearly 50 years. Years after Melissa's body was discovered, police attempted to analyze the DNA from the hair strands in the 1990s. Regrettably, they were unable to identify the DNA at that time due to the absence of a national database. This next case serves as a reminder of the dangers of being alone in a city, as exemplified by the tragic story of Barbara McLean. In 1977, 19-year-old Barbara relocated to Calgary from Nova Scotia, leaving behind her hometown of Innis. The primary motivation for her move was the lack of opportunities in the former mining town, which offered limited prospects for a high school graduate like herself. Barbara was an intelligent and ambitious individual seeking to build a life for herself. Having been in Calgary for approximately 6 months, she resided with her brothers, Bobby and Jim, and initially worked at a restaurant before transitioning to a job at a bank. According to Barbara's father, she was experiencing homesickness and had intended to visit her family for 2 weeks in early March, with the possibility of returning to college. Tragically, these plans were never realized. On February 25th, Barbara was socializing with friends at the Highlander Bar's cabaret when a disagreement with her boyfriend led her to decide to hitchhike home. She was last seen walking alone from the hotel in the early hours of the following morning. Approximately 6 hours later, a dog walker discovered her body near 6th Street and 80th Avenue, northeast of Calgary. The evidence suggested that Barbara had attempted to defend herself against her attacker, as indicated by the presence of blood on her left hand and foreign hair strands on her body, which bore multiple marks and bruises. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation. In the months following his daughter's tragic strangulation, Dr. Jim McLean expressed optimism that the case would be solved, predicting that the perpetrator would be apprehended within 2 to 3 years. He believed that the assailant had fled the scene in a taxi, as there were no other available transportation options. Despite a thorough investigation, which included interviewing hundreds of taxi drivers and collecting over 600 hair samples, the case went cold within a year. Barbara's case instilled fear in young women, highlighting the risks and vulnerability of being alone in a city, particularly at night. Dr. Jim McLean passed away in 2000, but his prediction ultimately came true years later. There were unsuccessful attempts to revive these cases in the 1990s, with some speculating that the cases of Patsy and Eva might have been motivated by intimate relationships. The Alberta Royal Canadian Mounted Police conducted an extensive investigation into the tragic cases of Eva Dvorak, Patsy McQueen, Melissa Reharek, and Barbara McLean, spanning several decades. Leveraging advancements in forensic technology and investigative techniques, they submitted evidence from all 4 crime scenes to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police's National Forensic Lab Services for analysis. Although male DNA was detected at each of the 3 crime scenes, the technology to develop a DNA profile from this evidence was not available at the time. Nevertheless, the striking similarities between the cases of Melissa Reharek and Barbara McLean led investigators to suspect that the same individual was responsible for both crimes. This suspicion became a central focus of the investigation for the next 40 years, driving the Alberta Royal Canadian Mounted Police's unwavering efforts to identify the perpetrator or perpetrators responsible for these heinous crimes. Despite the passage of time, the cases remained open, with investigators periodically re-examining the files as new information emerged. The advancement of forensic technology and evolution of police techniques paved the way for a breakthrough in 2003, when enhanced DNA analysis became available. This new technology enabled police to confirm, through DNA evidence, that the same suspect was linked to both Melissa Reharek and Barbara McLean's cases. However, when the suspect's DNA profile was compared to the National DNA Databank, no match was found. The profile was uploaded to the databank, but it remained unmatched for over 2 decades. At the time, the internet was still in its infancy, and cloud storage had not yet been developed. It wasn't until May 2024, after sustained efforts, that the identity of the assailant was finally revealed. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police launched a cross-border investigation into Gary Allen Sreri, a U.S. citizen born in 1942, using information obtained through investigative genetic genealogy. Sreri led a nomadic lifestyle, frequently altering his appearance and utilizing aliases to conceal his identity. His criminal history, dating back to 1966, includes intimate crimes against women. Following his posting of bail for an assault charge in California in 1974, Sreri fled to Canada, where he assumed various aliases, including Willie Blackman and Rex Long, while residing in Calgary between 1976 and 1977. He maintained a transient lifestyle, occasionally working as a cook, and regularly changed his appearance, residences, and vehicles to avoid detection. Sreri lived in Alberta and British Columbia from the mid-1970s until his deportation in 2003, evading authorities for nearly 3 decades. Gary Allen Sreri's ability to adapt to new environments enabled him to continue his criminal activities, evading his past. He was serving a sentence in Idaho for assault in 2011 when he died of natural causes. Following his death, police pieced together the events surrounding his crimes. They determined that Sreri targeted young girls, particularly teenagers, who were hitchhiking. He would approach them, commit his crimes, and then dispose of their bodies. Sreri was reportedly charismatic in his 30s, possibly using his charm to gain the trust of his victims. DNA evidence confirmed him as the common link between the cases of Eva Violet Dvorak, Patricia McQueen, Melissa Rahoric, and Barbara McLean. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police suspects that Gary Allen Sreri's victim count may be higher than the 4 known cases. Notably, his name never surfaced during the initial investigations. The 48-year wait for justice has been a long and arduous one. Nearly 5 decades after the first investigations began, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police finally uncovered the truth, bringing closure to the surviving loved ones of the victims. While identifying Sreri cannot erase the pain and loss endured by the families, it highlights the crucial role of modern technology in solving cold cases. The victims' families publicly expressed gratitude to the authorities for their efforts, acknowledging that although they never had the opportunity to confront Sreri, he ultimately faced consequences for his actions, serving time in prison before his death. On September 13, 2016, the Ashland police received an anonymous phone call from a distressed woman who claimed to have been kidnapped and held captive near her sleeping captor. Despite the challenging circumstances, she provided the best description she could have, the person holding her hostage, and the location she was in. Shawn Grate, once a popular teenager in Marion, Ohio, particularly among girls, had a charismatic demeanor that masked his inner anger, envy, and simmering aggression, at least temporarily. However, his true nature was revealed when he was arrested at the age of 18 for violently grabbing his girlfriend by the throat. A few years later, he broke into his 17-year-old girlfriend's home and choked her, repeating the terrifying act 8 months later by lurking behind her couch, armed with a butcher knife. Despite his violent tendencies, Shawn Grate's charm and apparent kindness still attracted women, leading him to father 3 children with 3 different women. His ex-wife, Amber Nicole Bowman, remembers a chilling threat he once made. "If I can't see my daughter, no one will." Eventually, Grate entered a relationship with Christina Hildreth, initially happy and content. However, his true personality soon emerged, marked by anger, dominance, jealousy, and a disturbing indifference towards his bewildered partner. Grate's preference for strangulation as a method of killing was evident when he repeatedly struck Christina in the face and choked her. In June, the violence escalated when Shawn punched Christina with such force that he broke her hand. Fortunately, Christina managed to convince him to take her to the emergency room, where she bravely disclosed the abuse she had endured to the nursing staff. Acting on the information provided by Christina, the police found Shawn hiding in her couch and promptly arrested him. Grate faced the consequences of his actions when he was apprehended and given a 180-day prison sentence for the attack. His troubles extended beyond just romantic relationships. After being denied a loan by a friend, Grate resorted to sending a chilling text message, "Meet the other me." He then proceeded to exploit the generosity of various women in Mansfield, viewing them as opportunities to fulfill his desires instead of focusing on maintaining employment. During this time, he encountered his first 2 victims, Rebecca Lisi and Candace Cunningham. Rebecca, who worked as a sex worker, was found dead in March 2015, initially believed to have died from an overdose. However, it was later discovered that her untimely demise was not accidental. Candace Cunningham, who had been living with Grate in Mansfield, was abducted in 2015. At the time, the police had no evidence, but Grate was certain of her whereabouts. Eventually, on the day of his arrest, he led authorities to her body, which was found at the burned-down house in Richland County. Grate's next victim, referred to as Jane Doe, experienced an even greater level of wickedness and brutality. She had initially known Grate through their badminton games in her apartment building, but once he gained her trust, he revealed his true violent and psychopathic nature. He imprisoned her, subjecting her to days of torture and rape, with her hands shackled and strapped to the bed. Despite her desperate situation, Doe had little hope of escape as Grate slept very little on the first night of her captivity. Eventually, after another day of relentless torment, Grate passed out, oblivious to the ringing phone beside him due to his deep slumber. Jane Doe, still partially restrained, recognized this as her chance to escape. She carefully leaned over her slumbering captor, making sure not to make a sound, and dialed 911. In a hushed voice, she whispered, "I've been kidnapped," when the operator answered. When asked if she could get away, Jane explained her fear of waking up her abductor, preventing her from escaping. There was a brief silence on the line after Jane softly muttered, "Oh, hush." The operator could only speculate on the disturbing situation unfolding in the bedroom, with a violent rapist and a courageous woman. After what felt like an eternity, Jane finally picked up the phone again. Accidentally triggering Grate's taser, she unintentionally woke him up. Luckily, he only glanced at the floor before falling back asleep, completely unaware that his victim had alerted the authorities and led them to the location where she was being held captive. Grate had been mercilessly murdering women who trusted him, and some of their decomposing remains were discovered in the house he had taken over when the police arrived. Subsequently, Grate was apprehended and subjected to questioning. Inside the residence, the remains of Stacy Stanley and Elizabeth Griffith were found. Both women had been strangled to death. Grate provided detectives with a detailed account of how he killed Elizabeth and Stacy. The intricate web of deceit and murder that Grate had woven throughout his adult life was now unraveling. Initially resistant to cooperate with the authorities after his arrest, Grate often shut down and responded incoherently. However, after repeated questioning, he eventually disclosed his long list of atrocities. With Grate's assistance, Cunningham's body was discovered in a burned-out house in Richland County. Grate claimed to have murdered Rebecca Lisi because she had stolen $4 from him in a bar. Additionally, he alleged to have killed another woman in Marion County, whose lifeless body was found in 2007. According to Grate, he believed her name was Dana. Dana Nicole Lowry, age 23, was positively identified as the victim using DNA analysis in June of 2019. Grate expressed his fear of facing the death penalty prior to his sentencing. He informed law enforcement, "I truly wish to survive this ordeal. I had aspirations of achieving much more." He disturbingly added, "However, I am aware that I would not have been able to escape the consequences." Grate was sentenced to death on June 1, 2018. The actions of Shawn Grate towards his victims were undeniably horrifying. Without the courage of Jane Doe, it is uncertain how many more women he would have harmed. For years, the pursuit of Tommy Lee Hill appeared to be a futile endeavor. Following his convictions for heinous offenses spanning 3 states and his disappearance from federal custody due to an administrative mistake, Hill remained at large until a single lead from a resolute survivor altered the course of events. Tommy Lee Hill's illicit activities, which commenced in the 1960s, cast a lengthy and ominous shadow over the lives of his victims and the communities he impacted. He perpetrated some of the most horrible crimes conceivable, including assaults on children, and was found guilty of a series of offenses in Michigan and Indiana. His criminal record included assaults on his young stepdaughters, intent to harm, burglary, firearms violations, and counterfeiting. One notable offense involved his 12-year-old stepdaughter. He was transferred from Terre Haute, Indiana, detention centers to Grand Rapids for sentencing, but escaped during the proceedings. Hill requested water, entered the women's restroom, and fled through a window into a waiting getaway vehicle. In 1979, Hill faced convictions for severe offenses in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but his sentence was never executed. On the day of his sentencing, Hill executed a daring escape from custody due to a clerical oversight. He proceeded to commit additional offenses in Pennsylvania. For years, Hill evaded capture, adopting new identities and locations. A reward of $7,000 was offered for information via an anonymous tip site, but years elapsed with no leads, and the case went dormant. Irma Shaw was the cornerstone of the pursuit of justice, propelled by an unyielding determination to hold Hill accountable and a profound sense of unresolved anguish stemming from her experiences as a survivor of Hill's terrible offenses. Her campaign was not solely focused on personal vindication, but also on advocating for the rights of others affected by Hill's malevolent actions. In 2017, a crucial anonymous tip reinvigorated the investigation as a woman came forward recalling a sighting of Hill stranded on a Pittsburgh highway in the 1970s with a disabled automobile. This revelation prompted lead officer Joe Garrett of the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force to re-examine the case, collaborating with Irma to employ innovative investigative techniques and genetic genealogy to track Hill's assumed identity in Pennsylvania. Their relentless efforts ultimately revealed in June 2024 that Hill had met a fatal demise in 1983 at the hands of an individual seeking retribution for the harm Hill had inflicted. Although this did not afford the opportunity for Hill to face justice in a courtroom, it provided a measure of closure for those impacted by his actions. Irma Shaw's traumatic experience with Hill and her subsequent crusade for justice highlighted the enduring impact of suffering and the vital importance of persistence, serving as a powerful testament to the unrelenting pursuit of justice and the significance of accountability, even in the face of elapsed time.